Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. There's a lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And of course tonight we're going to be talking about energy, a very special type of energy. But before we do, a little bit of admin, very important bit of admin. Prayers are please needed tonight for Liz Austin and her hubby Bernard, who is not doing very well at all. So please have them in your thoughts and prayers. Okay, now let's get on to tonight's topic. And all I can say is move aside Elon Musk and the electric car, because what I'm going to show you tonight will blow that right out of the water. Just so you get a bit of background to what hydrogen fuel cell or hydrogen energy is all about, let's have a look at a short video clip.
Hydrogen fuel cells can be used for a wide range of applications, like transportation, material handling, backup power applications, etc. The conventional combustion-based technologies presently used in vehicles and power plants. It is an opportunity for the fuel cell to provide its benefits. Hydrogen is used to power the fuel cell electric vehicles FCEVs. It exerts more efficiency over conventional engine vehicles, as it produces no tailpipe emissions, but only emits warm air and water vapor. Let's learn how a hydrogen fuel cell works. Do you know how a battery works? Yes, the fuel cells work like batteries, but they do not run down or need recharging. They can produce electricity constantly. Fuel cells can operate at higher efficiencies than a combustion engines and can convert the chemical energy in the fuel to electrical energy. A fuel cell is composed of two plates separated by an electrolyte membrane. One plate is called anode and the other is cathode. Hydrogen is passed through the anode while oxygen is passed through the cathode. At the anode, the hydrogen molecules are split into electrons and protons by a catalyst. The positive particle of hydrogen can pass through the membrane, but the negative particle cannot pass through it. However, atoms need an equalizing charge, and to achieve this, electron must change the path. That time, the electrons are forced through a circuit and generates electric current and heat. The end product of this reaction is water, H2O. At the cathode, the hydrogen protons, electrons, and oxygen combine to produce water molecules. Due to the lack of moving parts, the cells are highly reliable and its operation is silent. The hydrogen fuel cell is useful in the automobile industry also. Currently, there are several companies around the world working on the development of hydrogen cars. To learn more about the hydrogen fuel cell car, check out our next video.
All right,
Friends,
there you go, guys. That's just a bit about hydrogen and amazing technology, and it produces water. Well, it uses water. So you can't get much cheaper than that when it comes to driving your car. Okay, let's get our guest on. That's Quinton Scholes, and we're going to be talking about hydrogen and its applications in energy. Let me get our guest on. Here we go. Hi, Quinton.
Hi, Scott. How are we doing?
Excellent, buddy. Excellent. How are you going?
Very good. Sitting in load shedding in South Africa, but all good on this side.
Well, I'm not surprised about that. Now, Quinton, we're going to be talking about a really interesting technology and very relevant for South Africa. But before we do, it's the first time we've actually had you on as a guest here on Loving Live TV. So would you like to give a bit of your background to people watching?
Certainly. So my background's mostly been in business media for the better part of 20 years. Huge experience across the African marketplace. Funny enough, helped launch another TV channel, CNBC Africa, and Forbes Africa across the African continent. Took a 1-year sabbatical across the USA and went into venture capital in 2019. And through that, different FDI projects led me into the energy space with a huge amount of interest. And that's what got me here to this particular technology and GREENSERV impact.
Right. Well, look, from our little brief discussion earlier, I can see that the systems that you're working with could have a huge implication in South Africa. But before we look at that, what is this hydrogen stuff?
So, hydrogen is such an interesting element, but, we need to start talking about water. And water, as we all know, is H2O, which is 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen molecule. Hydrogen on the elements table is the most abundant element that's available on Earth. And, it's quite interesting is that if you take a bottle of hydrogen and a bottle of oxygen in their gas states, and you were to put them together and shake it up as one bottle, it's not going to make water. But if you ignite it, it turns it instantly into steam and into water. And I find it quite ironical, or God's sense of humor, how water is the one thing that kills a fire, yet you start the fire to get it to turn into water.
Yeah.
But hydrogen on its own, some of the interesting characteristics is that it's got a very high kcal rating, which says at 4,200, but it's highly explosive or flammable, and more importantly, I think from a worldwide perspective, the conversation has moved to hydrogen. South Africa now itself has a hydrogen roadmap, and there's a clear course that will take. However, this is something that's really, in essence, going to take 5-10 years to unravel. It's not a quick fix to certainly any of the solutions or the problems going on at the moment. But rightfully so, I think, hydrogen is, the fuel of the future. If we look at what's happening with net zero, carbon emissions, everything leads us to a more friendly world, and hydrogen fits in that space.
Right. Well, I think of hydrogen, which was used in that hot air balloon that blew up that German balloon. I'm just trying to think of the name of it now.
The Hindenburg.
The Hindenburg, that's the one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was using hydrogen, wasn't it? And after that, they then moved to helium, which is far more stable and just as light.
Well, we must also remember that, this was back in 1937.
Yeah,
Motor vehicles had only been running since the Model T, so 1905.
right.
I think what people, forget to mention about the Hindenburg is that it, at that point in time, and it had already traveled or flown, I should say.
Yeah, all the way from Europe.
Well, it circumnavigated the world, so it did over 1 million miles, which is quite remarkable. And having said that, obviously things go wrong, but I always like to say, if you on a good weekend and you get your Cadillac Squirtle out and you open that valve in that beautiful little cylinder, it's all good and well. If you don't like that in time, you get a nice little poof and take your eyebrows off potentially. So, but having then said that, we're still very happy to take that same cylinder and put that in the back of our trunk wherever we go, on our little weekend getaways. So yeah, it's how it's packaged.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Well,
Yeah.
I find it quite fascinating that hydrogen is the simplest atom there is, and yet it's
100%.
the most abundant, and
Yeah.
yet it is crucial to water, which is the stuff that life depends on. It's important.
Absolutely.
It's quite extraordinary that you've got oxygen, which we breathe, and you've got this stuff called hydrogen, which combine to make water that we drink. I mean, it baffles the brain, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the wonders of God, I suppose. It's
Absolutely.
It's rather incredible, and that we could use it now in these kind of technologies to power, to make power, which is brilliant.
Now,
Yeah.
why is this technology that you are working with so relevant in today's world, and in particular in South Africa?
We need to look at obviously what the current state is that we're in, and it's been declared as a national state of disaster. Employment rates are going down. Economic growth is, also not where it should be, and the realities is that businesses still need baseload power.
Yeah.
There's a strong movement to having ownership or taking control of your own power source.
Yes,
and I
there
think
is.
that's taking kind of the business risk back into your own hands. Really don't want to get too much into the political side of things in any way, but we want to keep the lights on for businesses to operate.
Right.
And the main emphasis behind that is keeping employment going. And that's critical for the country.
And food security as well, especially when it comes to the farming industry. Now,
Absolutely. I mean, it's water, food, which are the two major securities, and then energy. Nothing's going to happen unless we have power.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
Marlena lives in a huge estate. You've met or spoken to Marlena. She's my PA.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think there are about 100 houses in that estate. It's huge. And she wrote in the side chat just before we actually got started. She said, and I've copied this down. She says, we only just got out of load shedding from 2 p.m. up to 7:45 p.m. was supposed to top at 6:30. And then she goes on to say, tomorrow we will have no electricity from 9 o'clock till 4 p.m. No, that's 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. due to repairs of infrastructure. That is besides the load shedding. So one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight is the application of this technology in estates like that. But we'll get to that shortly. All right, now what's the biggest change to the marketplace since this hydrogen option has come about?
So, Scott, I think exactly on the point that you've just mentioned. Load shedding has reached a stage now where we're sitting on average in stage 6, which is about 7.5 hours of downtime a day. And batteries and solar, which most people from a residential perspective have resorted to, have effectively, the batteries do not have sufficient amount of charge time. So a good battery needs 4 to 6 hours to complete a cycle. And if you don't complete that cycle before the next load shedding hits, you damage those batteries in that process.
Yes.
So and now we're talking on a very small level, which is just your household. Imagine where businesses have switched over to solar, and it's a much bigger fitment, and their peak loads are very different.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, load shedding has severely hampered business. I've got some really close to home situations or scenarios where my local food store unable to, because the load shedding is happening in the morning, albeit that they're running diesel generators, they can't run it for that extensive period of hours. So there was no bread when I arrived. The bakery hadn't kicked off. There was no chicken on the rotisseries. And it's a silly example, but it's one that you understand how that could be brought into the bigger likes of things. So that's the one angle. The other one, obviously, diesel, the running of diesel. The hydrogen solution we have versus diesel really sits at a ratio of 1 to 6 from a cost perspective.
Wow.
That's a game changer.
Diesel creates a whole lot of pollution too.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, hydrogen. The beauty of any of the different or the various hydrogen technologies, once you've combusted it, so you break it into a gas, you combust that, and your byproduct is steam. It's water. So very much. And then we talk now, and 6 months ago, even 4 months ago, people were not so concerned. It was how do we get rid of our load shedding situation. Right. Now peak shifting has come into play. So it's become so critical. How do we cover the peak hours, and how do we cover our load shedding at the same time? And we all commonly refer to all of our stuff as being base load, which it's that instant power at a very high amount of kilowatts that's required.
Right. Okay. Now, how does your hydrogen solution work?
So at the very start of it is water, and that water goes into a water alkaline electrolysis. So water alkaline electrolysis, I think, going back to school days, and we had a cathode and an anode. You put that into water with a bit of voltage, and instantly water begins to break up, and it creates thousands of little bubbles. And those bubbles, in effect, is hydrogen that's coming out from the water. And that hydrogen is then not harvested, but it's fed through to a storage container, which is more for pressurization. And from there, we move over to the generator. So we run with all our units. It's a Cummins generator, and the Cummins generator, Cummins being one of the best generators, models, or makes that there are in the world. And the two models that we have are both a 120 kilowatt and a 400 kilowatt. But they effectively are the two workhorses. They are originally, these are diesel engines. So the current diesel generators that are out there, that are available to that everyone's using, it's the same unit from the head down. And I'm not sure how technical we want to get, but everything that sits then above the head is changed to gas. So it's a gas conversion on a Cummins engine, meaning it's running straight from hydrogen. And we have a battery auto start part of the system. So it's a complete package that powers itself straight off water. Nothing else needs to go into it, and real baseload power that you get out of it, which is quite remarkable. And I think we spoke a little bit before, where this kind of technology has been around for over 50, 60 years. There's nothing new there. I think where it is new is in this particular iteration, we are talking on a big size. I mean, the generator weighs 6.5 tons.
Wow.
it's a 20-foot container. So this is the 400 kilowatt engines.
Yeah.
It's a 20-foot container, and that's also quite important to understand. Is here where solar is also incredible. Obviously, a place in the sun for all the different technologies. But if you wanted to do a megawatt of power, and that was for a commercial building, you would require or need up to 2.5 hectares per megawatt of panels.
I thought it was more.
Well, that's for 1 megawatt. Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually reading that solar panels really aren't all that effective when you start talking about large volumes of electricity being generated.
So that's another part is we talk, and there's the word that always goes around is this a green energy solution? So in order to make it green hydrogen, the power source that's the initial source to create the hydrogen has to be from renewable energy. So be that from solar, be that from wind, or be that from hydro, and then you would classify that as green hydrogen. So solar can be used to create the hydrogen, use that hydrogen to be stored, and then to run your energy from that stored hydrogen.
Right.
But that's on a mass scale. This is our side of things. Really is far more kind of your own power unit, self-contained, and for your own energy needs on hand.
Right.
Without these worrying about, and it's what we often refer to as decentralized or a modular approach.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned 120 kilowatts. That's a huge amount of electricity. I mean, just to bring that into context, you could probably run about 200 houses on that, couldn't you?
Quick off the top of my head maths there, those houses won't be houses, they may be flats. So if you take a house, depends on the size of it, you go from 1.2 kilowatts household usage. Bearing in mind then in that scenario, you're now switching off geysers, you can't use a stove, you can't use anything. Then we get a 3 kilowatt, then you go, most of the solutions to households now about 5.1. So that maths wouldn't quite work for 200 houses. It also depends on when are they using that power. Households and residential, there's a peak in the morning and there's a peak in the evening time, predominantly. And whereas a business will run through cycles through the day. And it's always important to understand the profile of the client.
So what you're saying is that the average house at probably peak hour is using about 5 kilowatt. Which means that if you looked at the 400 kilowatt machine, the Cummins machine that you've got, if everybody was using, like in the evening time, you'd generate enough electricity for 80 houses, which is about 5 divided into 400. But then you've got batteries, so you'd be storing electricity during the night. So wouldn't you then be able to actually power more houses with a 400 kilowatt machine?
So on the household or the residential scenario, we're currently working with a very large estate. They have 3,000 homes in there. Wow. And that's looking at working on that modular approach. So their power requirement sits at about 3 megawatts, which is huge power. Mm-hmm. We're looking to do 4 modular, so one megawatt, which comprises then of 3 400s side by side, right? And then with a 1 megawatt battery UPS. So on the residential and commercial side, you effectively would just need to power the households with the battery, but you need to charge it. Yeah. And to charge it, you have your generators.
Right. And that would get rid of load shedding. You wouldn't have any load
That
shedding.
that would completely alleviate all the load shedding, in addition to that terminology I use, which is peak shaving.
Yeah.
So what you want to then do is take where they would have had the big peak in the morning and the big peak in the evening, that would be completely run by the batteries.
Wow.
And if it is in this particular instance, like where we are at the moment, on a 4-hour shift, we know that current household environments can't handle these. The generator would kick in, feed the battery until such stage that you've passed the load shedding and your peak shedding. So it both those scenarios, absolutely.
Well, look, let's do a little exercise here because let's make this a practical type situation. Before we do, I just want to tell people that one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating about this system is that you obviously don't use diesel. What you do is you have a JoJo tank full of water, and this machine actually draws the water as it needs it and generates electricity using water. That's what it does. So you can literally get your tap or hose and fill your JoJo thing up with water. And how long will that, let's say you've got a 400-liter JoJo tank, how long will that run the let's say, a 400 kilowatt system for?
So just on the 400 kilowatt, something I didn't necessarily touch on, the engine we overrate and then tune them down. So the 400 kilowatt engine comes in three varieties. So there's a 250 kilowatt engine, there's a 300 kilowatt engine, there's a 350 kilowatt engine.
Right.
We do the same with the 120, and that's just to account for loss of energy in the system. But so on a 350, you would use, which is a huge engine. I mean, that's massive power. Yeah. But a 350 would use 160 liters of water per hour, which is a bath is 160.
Wow. And that would generate how much electricity in that time?
A full 350 base load power for that hour. Kilowatt, yeah. Wow. And bearing in mind that no one ever sits using constantly the 350. You would be at 50 for that period of time where you're using the bath of water per hour, and then go down. Go down to...
the thing that I find remarkable about this technology, okay, now if you think about diesel, you burn diesel to create electricity, and you generate shit, you generate pollution. Now, with this system, you got a JoJo tank on one end full of water. The hydrogen and oxygen, which make up the water, gets separated through that process. They actually create electricity, and then what comes out the other end is water.
Yes.
So
there's a small loss of water. So there's a 20% loss because of we're taking water, we're making it gas.
That's crazy. You're generating all this electricity, and you're losing a small amount of water, but you're just creating water again on the other side. That is mind blowing. But okay, let's get back to this exercise.
And a good reason why no one really wants this technology. Why it's not being so easily accessible.
Well,
in all fairness.
Okay, now you mentioned that this technology came out 60 years ago, and I heard I remember many decades ago that there was this rumor that they had this technology where you could use water to run a car, and what had happened is the petrol companies had basically taken out the people who developed it, and they'd taken over the patents to make sure they couldn't be used because they wanted to make money out of petrol. Do you have any information on those theories or conspiracy theories?
My business partner knows I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if we do talk about cars, both BMW and Toyota have been at this for a very long time. There's two iterations of how that technology is used and how they harness it, and I'll talk about the modern day version. But as it stands on this particular application of the technology, firstly, we're talking a serious engine and a serious commercial fuel maker, which is our water alkaline electrolysis. So these are, That machine separate to the 6.5 tons is another 1.2 ton piece of equipment that's separating the water to a gas. So it's not. So if we think of that in a motor vehicle application, this is more very much on the industrial side. So to get it to work efficiently, to make it scalable down to motor vehicle applications,
Right.
comes with a whole other set of complexities in how much can you create in X amount of time in order to make sure that engine's going to run for that period of time. So that's the one problem. The second one really sits then, I mean, the rev cycle of the engine, a motor vehicle through gearing ratios, you want to be able to go faster than 20 k's an hour on a motorway. You know, our engines are essentially running at idle. They rev between 800 RPM to 1,200 RPM. Now, my car certainly won't get even off the stop sign if that were the case. So in that application, it's been slightly harder to develop the technology for motor vehicle use. And what's quite interesting is the fuel cell technology, where you store hydrogen in tanks in the car, that then fuels the engine, and they've gotten quite good with this. This is already available with tractors, trucks across Europe, and it's coming out fast and wide. So front-end loaders, commercial, agri equipment, they're playing heavily in that space already.
Yeah.
Do you need access then to hydrogen? And then the last iteration of the technology is where you are using that hydrogen to run the fuel maker or to run the engine. The engine is powering the electronic batteries, or the batteries, and then batteries are there. So it's still an electric vehicle. It's not a engine vehicle, but it's still running off hydrogen. So those are just, on the motor vehicle side, it's quite interesting. However, BMW's X5 next, which is already running, there's a hydrogen model.
Now look, we did a little exercise before we actually went live, and I just want to run through some figures, because what I find exciting about this in the use within an estate where you've got a number of homes, we use the example of a generator, or a hydrogen generator, which can power 50 homes, and I think you said that over 7 years could be paid off, and the total price would be about 3.5 million rand. So if you look at that price, the actual machine itself lasts for 20 years because it doesn't have these elements that fail. So 20 divided into 3.5 million, that's about 70,000 per house over the 20-year period. So if you divide that 70,000 by 20, it's about 3,000, just over, let's say 3,500 rand per year for that house to use electricity generated by the machine using water. Now, I think people in South Africa probably paying that per month just to run, and then they got load shedding on top. I mean, it's a no-brainer that this is the way to go.
Yeah, and you know, we've done some great partnerships with the likes of Merchant West Capital, being one of the banks that we use, where the main methodology at the moment is a 60-month term, which is what we call rent to own.
Right.
And that's the kind of the main funding model currently. However, there are a lot of different ways to treat this, and if you want to run it in a complex scenario where people are approaching us, particularly on this large estate, they take ownership of the asset, finance it how they see fit, and then are working a scenario out for the estate manager, the body corporate, on a payment term. Yeah.
All right. Now look, if you were to do a sales pitch again to Marlena, she's in a huge. Well, I thought it was about 100 houses. Their estate is 275 homes. Now, just doing the math. Okay, so if you were to supply the solution that you supply for that entire estate. Do you want to quickly run through some numbers? Just ballpark, not exact, just so we can break it down to what the investment would be per house over that 20-year period, and then they can obviously work out the savings of that.
So I think what I'd like to maybe mention is let's look at this different, because the scenario I'd like to give you rather is, and let's go back to my local grocer. So,
right.
And it's a Checkers that's around the corner.
Right.
So in that particular scenario, their peak usage requirement is a.
Sorry, guys, this is South African internet. We'll be back shortly. Okay, can you start that again, because we just lost you for a moment there? So you were just talking about your local Checkers.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they run. Their peak usage is 187 kilowatts. In that particular scenario, we have put in a 250 kilowatt solution.
Right.
That takes out all the eventualities for them, even for future growth. It also means, and this is important, but it means that they can be fully operational through the peak from beginning to end.
Right.
But more importantly, when financed over 60 months, that particular costing works out almost, it's a few rand short, but it's identical to their Eskom bill currently.
Wow.
So now that is before they've had to worry about the loss of business, the diesel, the and the escalation of Eskom's rates, which is coming.
Yeah.
We know
that.
These numbers are 32%, and so they're realities. And power versus, it's all good and well. I've heard this from numerous amounts of people. Even with all the load shedding, their bill has not changed whatsoever. So I'll give you some real numbers. So a 250 kilowatt engine is about 7.5 million. That financed is 170,000 a month over the 5-year period, and which would be equivalent to their Eskom. Their biggest worry is that on the current goings, they are spending 350,000 a month on diesel.
Wow.
So before we even get into the competitiveness with Eskom and reliability and everything else, just on we half of what their diesel bill is.
Well, and I think we should make it clear that this is only the investment monthly over the first 5 or 6 years, and then you've got the 14-year period where it works. It's got a 20-year lifespan, and you don't pay a cent.
Yeah, but we good old South Africans, we look at the situation now, and we're eternal optimists, and believe that in 5 years' time from now, we're going to have 20 nuclear power stations here, and everything's going to be working. So, so on the 5-year scenario, but you'll still have power for the next 20.
Wow. So, how many houses would that setup do? The 250 kilowatt. Would that do about 50?
So every situation we do a full load profile on the actual site, and that's critical to understand what their load profile is, what's their current peak usage. We can do some basic maths by taking that 5.1 or 3 kilowatts, and you can then do draws on that. So we could work it out, but it's a lot of households.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, next question. We mentioned about the Hindenburg that just went up in flames, and that was hydrogen. Is hydrogen safe?
So, absolutely. The interesting thing with hydrogen is, well, we know it rises. Otherwise, the Hindenburg wouldn't have gone up.
Yeah.
So that's an important part to also understand, because in our applications and what we're using it, you know, if there were a leak somewhere, it's going straight up into the atmosphere. Okay, not that we want that. The good news is that we don't store any of the hydrogen.
Right.
There is no storage here.
So
Unlike
there's no fire risk.
There's, well, no. If no different to if you are like most households now have gas cylinders which are running your geyser and your shower. You have a unit that's outside that's got an igniter. If it's plumbed right and connected right, I have had an instance with an ignition on a geyser that didn't work out so well many years ago. But generally, no, it's as safe as can be. But we're not storing any. How the machine works is it's producing enough hydrogen only for what's required from the use of the machine at the time.
Right.
And so there's no storage, and certainly, and more specifically, there's no storage of hydrogen under pressure. When we talk about hydrogen plants, they store hydrogen. Those storage facilities are at 700 bar pressure, and that obviously is treated very differently. So in our application, no risk from that perspective whatsoever, and certainly no Hindenburgs.
Yeah, the reason this is important, because I think of that LPG accident that took place at Boksburg about a month ago, and over 40 people died when that thing went up because the gas was heavier than air, and they were obviously in the gas area when it went up. But we're talking about hydrogen, which is lighter than air, so if there was an explosion, it would never go along the ground; it would be up in the air.
Yeah. And on that point is the hydrogen roadmap, which South Africa has and is embarking on. Yeah. One still needs to take into account that you would have to then distribute that hydrogen. It needs to get to the relevant facilities that are using the hydrogen and transported there under pressure in tankers to site. So the transportation of hydrogen certainly is an area that the books in South Africa haven't really been written yet. So the glamorous being hydrogen as a big energy solution is a 5 year from now, 10 years from now solution. This is an on-demand, as you need it, water alkaline usage creation of your hydrogen right to the machine that's alongside it, and we're not storing anything.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned the financial viability, and am I correct in saying that if we look at the 20-year term, and we look at where you've got a large estate, each house would have to invest about between 70 to 100,000 rand over that 20-year term to actually acquire the machine that would then drive their power and get rid of load shedding. So we're talking about something like this, say 3,500 to 5,000 rand per annum investment over the 20-year period to have no electricity issues.
So some of the models we've worked on in collaboration with various parties, it's significantly less than that. Because of the use of batteries, and we then don't have to have a constant peak load, we can actually put a much smaller generator in, a much bigger battery, and that combination brings that cost significantly lower. So our maths on a 5-year repayment was significantly lower, way lower than that. And as I mentioned, we work on the 5-year model. A lot of people are even talking cash. And why they look at those two elements is from a tax perspective. It's well known and documented that under renewables or green or energy, there's a tax break, which is called Section 12B. And so if you take your Section 12B into account, 28% then is written off under renewable if it's a purchase. And, so there's a whole lot of clever ways one can play with that and then work out how that repayment works over that period of time.
That's amazing. Now, look, I've got a bunch of people in the side chat who are saying, how do we contact GreenServ Impact? Now, do you have a website under that name?
Absolutely. So 2 websites. So the technology, if the heavy technical people want to go in, it's .net zero, so www.dotnetzero.com.
Okay.
And then GreenServ is GREENSERV, greenserv.com.
Okay, so .netzero.com. And you've got obviously your phone contact details and things like that there.
All our phone contact and information is available.
And the other website is, again? GreenServ.
So GreenServ without the E at the end. So GreenServ.com.
.com. Okay, so they're both .coms.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to put those into the side chat, just so people can have a sticky while we're talking. And what I'll also do is I will drop those in below the video so that people can have a look at them in their own time later. Okay, so they're the 2 websites, guys, that you got to go to if you. That's .netzero.com and then space or greenserv.com. So that's not com or. Okay, just to be clear. Okay, so moving on.
Yeah.
What is the process to getting this power?
So first part always is doing a load profile on the client. With the main categories we're going to look at is where are their peaks. That's quite important. Mm-hmm. And understanding how that power is used. Certain applications, I mean, it changes so vastly, and that will then determine whether we go more battery generator and what that combination. So it very much what one refers to as hybrid or a hybrid solution. Once we've done that, very simply send a quotation. We have a 5% securing deposit. That's just for the actual ordering of it. Thereafter, you can use your own bank, but we have partnered with Merchant West Capital, as I've mentioned. And once that financing is discussed between said client and the bank directly. After approval of that, the order is then placed. So I think also great or good to know is that there's a 90-day delivery period. So 90 days is, I think, for some people at the moment, incredibly long. For when we talk big solar fitments into factories and so on, it's well within the same scope of their delivery times. And yeah, we take 10 days for installation, site setup, and we look at different factors then, which I'll discuss after. And the last part of that is, and most importantly, is only once that system's on the ground at your site running and working, then does your first payment become applicable.
Right.
So yeah, and in terms of that site preparation, there's certain, in terms of the water, ideally we want the generator or the gen set to be as near to the transformer or the board as possible. And so we'd get water to that side. And a lot of people are looking at doing rainwater harvesting.
That's a good idea.
Particularly with the amount of rain we've had over the past while.
Absolutely.
And so on the bigger solutions, and particularly when we get to a 1 megawatt where there's 3 of these 20-foot container machines running, we would like to put two JoJos alongside that and do some rain harvesting and keeping in with the green and so on.
Now, look, this question might sound stupid, but why don't Eskom use this technology? Because, I mean, when you start talking megawatts of power, that's a huge amount of electricity being generated.
So, good question. It's all about scalability. So, in our particular application, we work best for up to, and let's cap it at 2 megawatts, and you'd have to then do and module and decentralize then your 2 megawatts. Right. So from an Eskom perspective, countrywide, this is not the route to go by any means. Nuclear still is, one of the best power sources you can get, and coal, it is our natural resource. It still baffles me how we're following the US rules and regulations around carbon when that's what we have here, and no power. But anyway, it's a scalability. This is serving a purpose in smaller environments and making sure you've got the lights on.
What about a town like Orania or a town like Victoria West? Now, Orania's got 500 homes, I think, at the moment, and it's building another 500. And Victoria West has probably got about 400 homes.
So when we talk 5 megawatts, 10 megawatts, we also do hydrogen plants, and the hydrogen plants can generate up to that kind of power.
Wow! That whole community.
That would run an entire town. Absolutely.
Wow! So that would get the whole town off the grid. They would have no load shedding. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because...
But when you get to that size, the costs are significantly more expensive.
Right.
So the whole model in that environment changes. So we certainly there's a 20-year business model. Going back to some of those interesting things, when we separate the hydrogen and the oxygen, we get an 8-to-1 ratio. So there's actually a lot more oxygen that's produced. And that oxygen then is obviously applications for hospitals and many other things. So plants by mechanics are need to be well run, operated. It's a power plant that you're putting down.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that is because I want to tell you an analogy of what we're talking about here. When I first came to Queensland in 1994, and I was working on the development of the first smart city, which was Ipswich, with the internet side, that I was actually the project manager for that. And there was a new estate being developed in Ipswich called Springfield. And the guy who was developing it, he actually came in when he heard about the internet. And I had a discussion with him, one-on-one, about where the internet would take us in the future. And as a result of that discussion, he ran fiber right through the entire estate, to every single house. And as a result of that, that one thing where fiber is available and super fast internet is available to every home, their housing prices have gone through the roof. Now, if you take the South African situation where someone's thinking, if any developers listening now, you think you're developing an estate, let's say like where Marlena lives, so you've got 275 homes you're going to be developing. Now, imagine if you can say, when you're actually selling off these blocks, that we can guarantee that there'll be no load shedding because we've got our own power. That would add a huge amount to the price of each block, because people would they would jump at that sort of situation. So there's a huge potential commercial spin-off here for people. Now, okay, let's move on. What sort of maintenance do these machines need? Because they're obviously pretty big.
So the good part is that in essence we are talking from the head down, it's a diesel generator. So what we do in that 5-year term, there's a full 5-year maintenance SLA. So like any motor vehicle, every 3 months or X amount of hours, we'd have a minor service. In that minor service, down to air filters, oil filter. We check to see if there's water within the oil, but it's a very basic minor service, and it's just checking that everything's good and running. When we do every 12 months, we do a major service. That will be the full spark plugs, checking the injectors, pressurization. Obviously, the water alkaline electrolysis that needs to be filled up with the relevant salts that are used. There is an additive to it for that to work. And what we've also then done in how we've packaged this for the SA market is that at the end of that 5-year term, because you're going to take ownership after 5 years,
Right.
is that we've included a full refurbishment of the unit. So I'm thinking of, previously owned or previously loved, as these car companies want to say, but the transfer of asset at that point in time, in essence, is a fully refurbished working unit. So, but all of that is included in the package when you buy it.
Right. So what sort of, if you looked over that 20-year term, what do you think the maintenance costs would be on the machine in total?
So at this point in time, we're working on roughly 20-25% of its original value, for every 5 years thereafter. Which,
so every 5 years or 4 years, you're looking at about the cost of the actual unit.
Well, no. So 25% of every 5. And
every 5. Sorry. So over the 20-year period, you're basically looking at the maintenance costs. Okay.
Yeah, and that's all that you then in for. The best way to think of it is it's a motor plan.
Yeah, and it's just making sure that it runs smoothly, etc. Now, because of crime in South Africa, which is obviously a huge issue, what sort of safeguards do these machines have so that you can't have some toy coming along and tampering with it or setting it alight or whatever?
It's too heavy. Okay. So the interesting that you mentioned that, but one of the biggest new theft in South Africa is solar panels.
Yes.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, I can believe it.
And so here, we're talking machinery. It's machinery equipment. It's a 20-foot container.
Yeah.
I don't think we're quickly ending up and running off with that. I know in certain of the mining applications where we've discussed installations there, it's a skid that would be put on a concrete block, no different to a diesel genset, and they are looking to bolt those down. So that would be the extremity of what's needed to be done from that perspective. But it's not like solar panels at the moment, which are in high demand.
Yeah. Now you mentioned water. I mean, obviously, without water you can't run this thing. Now, as we know, South Africa's been completely inundated with floods. I mean, it's just crazy what's happening. I've seen the Vaal Dam now has 12 sluice gates open, and people down below are being hammered.
There's still more water coming in than they can get out.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
I think they've got up to 20 sluice gates to open, and if they open the other 8, that's going to completely sink. There was one guy talking who said that if they open 2 more sluice gates, their houses were like up to halfway up the garage underwater. If they add 2 more, or open up 2 more sluice gates, he was saying that the houses will probably go underwater. So what kind of water? You mentioned capturing rain from the roofs and stuff like that. So you can use that sort of water.
So the easiest way to work with it is that it's drinking water.
Right.
So if it's drinkable, we're good. So it can be grey water, drinking water, some municipal, and then the last borehole water. Where we do specifically running into issues is if that water has too big a metal content.
Right.
So there will be, if it's I was looking in Steenberg where it's mountain water coming off the mountain water that they're storing. And that's content. We have to put another treatment on it for that water to be used. So the machine doesn't like metals in the water. But outside of that, rainwater, drinking water, borehole water, we're pretty safe. There is a filtration part of that water. Alkaline is a filtration. There is an osmosis process that goes with that. So it's removing the salts and the metals is important.
Right. Now, one of the areas that I know has really been hit by these load shedding periods are the farmers. This product would be absolutely ideal for a farmer who's got these big machines that go and irrigate their property, and because that would actually do that job, wouldn't it?
So the agricultural sector is by far and large, I think, one of the biggest markets for us. They're are suffering. It's critical times for them, from a harvest station, from watering, just getting constant supply of water to the pumps for irrigation purposes. And we've obviously now getting more and more exposed to this, but those water irrigations run on cycles. They have to complete a cycle, and some of those cycles have certain either pesticides in it or additional minerals or nutrition in it, and then those cycles aren't getting completed. And so this will get to a point where it would even mean that they're going to completely not be able to do their next growth cycle, which would be catastrophic. Just on that particular side, on the agri side, if they are doing exportation, a lot of these big international exporters are looking for some kind of a green, carbon neutral solution. And what's nice is you automatically then get to tick another box, which is not done that often with them. So that's a big attraction as well. But then maybe lastly, also to mention with farming, is that we can put a small solution alongside the water pump area. You can have another small setup, be it 2-3 machines in what we call daisy chain near the production side. And so if you're worried about extensive amount of transmission lines or getting that power from one to the next, that's also incredibly useful, is that it's just modular and put it down where it needs. The only addition we add on in that scenario is make sure that we do put solar with it so that it can become a semi-on-grid, off-grid solution.
Fantastic. Now, one thing we haven't talked about, what's the kilowatt tariff?
So I love the conversation of kilowatt tariffs, because when we first started entering the market towards the end of November last year, that's the first question that everybody asks and wants to know. What's going on at the moment? I think and I believe that it's the last question on anyone's mind right now. We're now talking about providing power and consistent power. The bigger risk to business is no longer what's that going to be. It's more, can I get power? Can it be delivered? And will it be delivered consistently? And that this solution does that. However, having said all of that, when we did the models with the rent-to-own scenario, as I mentioned earlier, we price comparative with Eskom before these increases that are coming. So if we talk of a 50 kilowatt unit, it's obviously, as you get to the bigger units, much more economical.
Right.
But so that'd be R1.50 down to a 350 unit, which would be 69 cents per kilowatt. That's unmatchable even on an Eskom level.
What's Eskom charging per kilowatt at the moment?
That varies on. So we're much more familiar currently with your commercial industrial markets. So their off peaks would be down to 69 cents, 70 cents on off peak, and then peaks R2.50 in that region.
So what you're saying is on the larger machines that you've got, your kilowatt hour or kilowatt tariff is 69 cents, and they're during the off-peak, their Eskom's is 69 cents, which matches yours. But for the
correct, yeah.
But the peak time it goes up to R2.50. So
and diesel at the moment per diesel kilowatt cost, working that out on average, is now sitting at R7.50.
So if someone's got a big business and they're using diesel generators, then they're absolutely crazy not to get one of these machines.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a no-brainer. Okay. So we've mentioned that farming is one of your target areas. What are other areas? I guess mining, but what other areas do you target? Sorry, guys, we've just got another internet issue.
Housing estates, hospitals,
sorry, mate.
Retail shopping centers.
Could you start that again? Because we had a little few seconds dead there. Yeah, back to you.
Oh, sorry about that. So all agri markets, and then cold storage, all cold storage facilities. And why we mention that particular market is that it's now no longer just the fact that these fridges and these large refrigerations are switching on and off, but that with them going on and off, when they come back on, there's a huge kick in your peak power. But the compressors, the maintenance of these, so they're actually starting to fail. There's additional maintenance
because of the load shedding. Yeah. Because
of the load shedding, so it's the on off. I even hear amongst friends and that, just on a household scenario where fridges, home fridges, it's a problem.
And routers, the router that connects you to the internet. I mean, they're being hammered by these load shedding events.
It's everything, in essence, worked fairly okay when we were just on a nice 2.5 hour. I think if people will be quite happy if they heard the word stage 2 again.
Yeah.
But and I don't think this is going to change. It's not going to change. I heard we're on stage 6 till the end of March.
Yeah.
Which is quite incredible.
Cobus Farias said rates vary as much as from 96 cents to R4.88 per kilowatt hour. So all those are way above what it would cost to run your largest machine.
Absolutely.
What about a machine that was like going to be doing? Let's take Marlena's, their particular area with 275 homes. Ballpark figure, what would their kilowatt hour cost be on that?
So we have a very fancy app, which I'm just going into.
Can people use that app? How do they find it?
So we do have dealer distributors who have access to the app. Right. And so if they come and see you and then have the discussion effectively, we'd be able to do a quotation right there and then for you.
Wow.
Right off the app. Yeah. But in Marlena's situation, I think you could look somewhere in the region of 76 cents to R1 a kilowatt.
Wow. And that'd be for 20 years. No inflation.
Yeah. I like you keep saying the 20 years, and it's such an interesting one because everything we do sits on the 5, and we've assured that on the 5. When we talk about 20 years, we talk about the LCOC, so the long term or the full cycle over the 20 years, and then that takes the maintenance in and everything else. And yet, all those models, and we've really showcased them, and we have all that. People are still want to know, do I get a proper ROI in my 5 years?
Yeah.
And that you already get in that period.
Now, that estate which are actually taking on your equipment to power the homes that are going to be built there, what's the name of that estate? Because I think you'll get a lot of people wanting to go there.
So I think it's too early to say.
Okay.
It's a very large estate that sits between Johannesburg and the Vaal, and yeah, they're not the only estate that we're chatting to.
Okay, so it's south of Johannesburg then.
South of Johannesburg, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And there, the scenario, interestingly enough, was no different to what many other estates have done, where they've said, let's go solar, and then realizing how much space. So you now need to buy an adjacent farm, or just to get that level of or that amount of space to put solar in.
Yeah.
Now, and those were a lot of conversations for these estates on the old premise of a stage 2 scenario. The batteries are your most expensive part of all of this. So when you start moving to where we are now, that would have to be even thought of again. That the battery quote portion that they had, you could effectively double that now before you to get to something that's going to work under the current scenario, if it can get enough charge in that period. So it's really shifted quite a bit.
Okay, now I've got a question here from Petruza, who says, has GreenServ approached Cape Town municipality yet?
No, and I know that there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of movements. We first and foremost have gone from a B2B scenario and not tried to delve into too many of the tender type scenarios or political or tendering or anything like that. So we've gone to market to provide businesses a solution up until this stage. Yeah.
Okay, but
we are with bigger concerns through relevant parties, but the main emphasis has really been to enable business.
Right. But if you were approached by a municipality that, like, let's say, again, going back to Orania, I know they're putting up a whole lot of solar panels there, but, you know, they might say, because they're now extending by another 500 blocks, that this system might be ideal for them to go off the grid.
Yeah.
So you'd be happy to talk to people like that?
Absolutely. The property developer can welcome to give us a shout right from the beginning, and then we could work. There still is from our perspective to stay grid tied.
Yeah.
So you'd still have your Eskom infrastructure piggybacking off the back of that, and then running, and then just working load shifting and peak shifting in that scenario.
Now, just mentioning Eskom, now let's take the Orania situation again. If they had your system in and they were generating more electricity than they needed, I understand that electricity are now looking at actually buying electricity from other people. So you could actually create a profit out of selling this stuff back to Eskom.
So they regulate how much you can kick back to the grid, but you can kick back. And it's a very good example of what you're talking about is we've been in communication with some old age retirement homes or facilities, but housing estates for the elderly, where there we could put a power generating source on them which services them, but when they're not sitting in their peaks or thresholds, we kick that back. So that becomes an income generating scenario for them. So absolutely, that is a consideration.
Oh, look, I love this idea. I'm so pleased we've had this discussion. What I might do is I know Joost well. He's the guy who basically is in charge of the Orania movement in Orania. And I might send him this link so you can go and have a look. I know they're discussing different ideas at the moment. All right, so Quinton, is there something else you'd like to raise regarding your amazing technology? Because you know, in this world of climate change, where you're creating electricity out of using water, and then your end product is water and some oxygen, I mean, you can't get greener than that, can you? And just talking about that, you know, you've heard of this carbon footprint they always talk about.
Yeah.
Now, would you get carbon credits for using this on your estate?
On an estate scale, yes. And with that, we have partnered with a very large entity in South Africa, well-known people from the banking world who specifically are targeting carbon credits. On your own business scenario, if you were just running one 250 kilowatt engine, it's not worth the effort and the work to get that carbon credit. If you're running, 2 megawatts or 6 megawatts, some of these farms where we'll do 3 2-megawatt solutions,
Right.
in that instance, that carbon benefit is a discussion to be had. But there's a lot of people that are putting funds together where they're pooling these into the fund, and then you can get the benefit through that and then get the carbon. So a lot of that is going on in active, and we're very much involved with that journey as well.
Right. Well, look, I just want to thank you for coming on and chatting to us, because South Africa needs to get off the Eskom grid, because I think it's doomed to fail. And I've been saying that for years now on Loving Life TV. I've been saying, hey guys, if you can, get off the grid. And of course, at that time, we didn't have your product, but people were using solar and stuff like that. But for these new estates, I mean, it's a no-brainer, because if you can say there'll be no load shedding on this estate because we've got this technology, that's going to add about 20 to 30% to the value of the property.
Yeah, that is exactly what this particular estate is looking at. Not only that, they want to open a phase 2 and a phase 3, and you can't open a phase 2 and a phase 3 if you can't guarantee that there's power. So by mere fact that they can guarantee they'll have power, they can actually get back into business per se. But yeah, the reality here is the biggest thing is investing in yourself or investing in your business future in this scenario.
Yeah.
That's the key word here. More than it's no longer just trying to get through load shedding. If things don't change, businesses cannot run at this current rate, and expenses, certainly with what's available, is not going to cut the mustard. So,
Yeah.
and if you can flatline your business risk over the next 5 years and say, I can guarantee it's stable, that's the power I'm going to get out,
Yeah.
that's my cost fixed, that's a game changer in order to start planning for the future. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, fantastic.
And Scott,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was told I was not allowed to say goodbye. Well, firstly, thank you to Loving Life, but a special thank you to Hanneke Venter, who arranged and got us in contact with you.
Yeah, well, look, we actually have a fabulous team here at Loving Life, and you've spoken obviously to Marlena.
And Molly, absolutely been helpful. Thank you.
Marlena is absolute gem. She's been working for me now for 4 years, I think, and she organizes our live streams, and some people find her too efficient because she becomes quite bossy when people don't do things when they're supposed to. But when you've got 5 or 6 live streams per week that you're running, the amount of work to put each live stream together, because people have got to Skype you, they've got to send you talking points, I've got to do research on the stuff. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and you get the odd person who comes on, and trying to get them to cooperate, just to even make Skype contact, is like it's near impossible, and so it can be very frustrating for her. But she's an absolute gem. And then we've got, of course, Nat, who looks after our forums, and I don't know if you've got some material you'd like to put on the forum, but we can happily do that as well, a PDF or something like that. And these forums are covering a huge area. I would suggest, if you've got a PDF, that basically sets out what your product's all about. If you send that to Marlena, and Marlena could then forward it to Nat, and we could put that into, we call it our PDF library, and we could have it in there so people can actually pull it down, have a look at it. And this PDF library is becoming incredibly valuable as a resource. And
I have a very nice little one-pager that just talks to the unit, to the machines and the technology and the benefits and how we put it together. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Because what I do every day is I send out a daily email, and any new items on the forum, we actually put on that email, and that goes out to a lot of people. And obviously other links on the Loving Life TV platform. But no, look, it's been fantastic chatting to you, and
Thank you.
good luck with your product. I think it's exciting.
And thank you for having us. It's an absolute pleasure.
You're very, very welcome, and I look forward to chatting to you again in the future. Maybe when you've got someone like Arania becoming involved.
You send me your number.
I'll send yours a copy or a link to this video,
right?
And suggest he has a look. All right, mate. Have a great evening, and take care.
You too.
Okay.
All the best.
Cheers.
Catch you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. That was Quinton Scholes from GreenSerV Impact, and what a great product. I mean, that can save people a lot of money over the long term. And I just want to say thank you to the moderators, for I saw there were a couple of naughties in there that were deleted, and thanks for doing the great job you guys do. Have a great evening. Don't forget, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, we've got a discussion on another subject. And seeing we were talking about farmers tonight, I'm going to go out with one of our theme songs called Hier Bly Ek Boer. Take care, and see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time.
Meer as 61,000 van ons voorvaders het op die grens vir ons gesterwe, sodat ons vry kan wees. Die is my land, die is my reg, hier is ek boer. Van stoppels ek gemaak en sal ek terugkeer. Die Bybel is die woord waaruit ek leer, soos die grond op die aarde. Hier bly ek boer. So diep in die nacht sal die vyand kom, maar hier bly ek staan en ek draai nie om, want jy maak my nie bang nie. Hier bly ek boer. My opa wat maniekie roek kon sing, soos hy stap deur die lande. Hier was hy boer. My wortels lê diep in die grond geplant, my siel soos my pa los ek vir jou die land, en jy hoef nie te vrees nie. Hier sal jy boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal sterf. Die is my bloed, my zweet, my rug. Die is die plek waar my voel kom, die lief sal kom, die lief sal kom, die lief sal kom, die lief sal kom.